The docking clamps grabbed the ship with a loud metal sound that Claire Morrison felt in her bones. She sat in the pilot's seat for a moment, her hands still on the controls, and let out a long breath. Another job done, another pile of credits that would disappear as fast as they came. The Drifter's luck was not a pretty ship. It was old, patched in too many places, and made sounds that no ship should make. But it was hers, and it flew, and that was enough. Claire had learned long ago that enough was all she could hope for out here on the edge of civilized space. She pushed herself up from the seat and walked through the narrow corridor to the cargo hold. Empty now. The mining equipment she had hauled from the inner systems was already being unloaded by station workers who did not look at her or speak to her. She was just another hauler. Nobody special, nobody worth remembering. Danny Schultz met her at the airlock with a tablet in his hand. He was a thin man, with tired eyes, and a beard that needed trimming. He had been her co-pilot for 6 years now. And in that time, Claire had never seen him smile for more than a few seconds at a time. 2,400 credits, he said, showing her the screen. Minus docking fees, fuel costs, and the repair we need on the air recycler. That leaves us with about 2,000. Maybe a little more, Claire nodded. It was not good, but it was not terrible either. They could eat for another month. They could take another job. They could keep moving forward. One small step at a time. I'm going to look for work, she said. You handle the repairs. Danny grunted in agreement and turned back toward the engine room. Claire grabbed her jacket from a hook near the door and stepped out onto Waystation Omega 7. The station was an ugly place. Gray walls, flickering lights, and air that smelled like machine oil, and too many bodies packed into too small a space. Thousands of beings, from dozens of species, moved through the corridors, each one focused on their own problems, their own survival. Nobody made eye contact, nobody said hello. Claire made her way toward the job board near the central market. She had been to this station before, many times, and she knew the fastest routes through the crowds. Her boots echoed on the metal floor as she walked, and she kept her eyes forward and her expression hard. Looking weak out here was dangerous. The central market was a wide open space, filled with stalls and platforms and noise. Merchants shouted about their goods. Customers argued about prices. Somewhere in the distance, music played from a speaker that crackled with static. Claire pushed through the crowd, heading for the job board on the far wall. But something made her stop. A crowd had gathered near a raised platform in the middle of the market. Claire could see a tall figure standing on the platform, a Corvani merchant with green scales and 4 arms that moved constantly as he spoke. His voice was loud and sharp, cutting through the noise of the market like a knife. Final chance, the merchant was saying. Final chance to bid on this lot. 7 Myrelian cubs, young and healthy, suitable for domestic service, laboratory work, or personal entertainment. Starting bid is only 500 credits. Claire felt something cold settle in her stomach. She pushed closer to the platform, ignoring the annoyed sounds from the people she shoved past. When she reached the front of the crowd, she saw them. 7 small creatures huddled together in a metal cage. They looked like a mix between foxes and cats, with soft fur in shades of gray and brown, large pointed ears, and golden eyes that reflected the harsh station lights. The biggest one could not have been more than 3 feet tall. The smallest was barely half that size. They were pressed against each other, trembling. The smallest one had buried its face in the fur of its sibling, hiding from the crowd that stared at them like they were objects. Like they were things. No bids? The Corvani merchant said. His name was Vethrek, according to the sign behind him. Come now. This is a bargain. These cubs are from a destroyed world. There are not many left. They could be collector's items in a few generations. Someone in the crowd laughed. Claire did not. Very well, Vethrek continued, his voice dropping with false disappointment. If there are no buyers, these specimens will be transferred to the processing facility. Waste not, want not. Their biological materials will be extracted and sold separately. Organs, fluids, pelts. There is always a market for raw materials. Claire felt her hands curl into fists at her sides. The cubs seemed to understand what was being said. The biggest one wrapped its arms around the others, pulling them close. Its golden eyes scanned the crowd, looking for help, looking for hope, and finding nothing but cold indifference. Claire thought about her bank account. She thought about the fuel they needed, and the repairs that had to be done. She thought about Danny and the ship and the life they had built together in the cold darkness between stars. Then she thought about her childhood on Earth, before everything fell apart. She thought about the animals she had wanted to save, the dreams she had given up, and all the terrible things she had watched happen without doing anything to stop them. She was tired of watching. "How much?" she heard herself say. Her voice was louder than she expected, and the crowd turned to look at her. Vethrak's 4 eyes focused on her with sudden interest. "Ah, a human buyer. How delightful. For you, I will offer a special price. 2,200 credits for the entire lot." A bargain. Considering the alternatives, 2,200 credits. Almost everything she had. Danny would be furious. They would be stranded here with no fuel and no way to leave. It was stupid. It was crazy. It made no sense at all. Claire pulled out her credit chip and held it up. "Done." The crowd murmured in surprise. Vethrak looked amused as he processed the transaction. The numbers on Claire's account dropped to almost nothing, and she felt a strange mix of terror and relief wash over her. The cage door opened with a click. 7 pairs of golden eyes looked up at her. The smallest cub peeked out from behind its sibling, its tiny nose twitching. The biggest one stood slowly, placing itself between Claire and the others, still protecting them even now. "Hello," Claire said softly, kneeling down to their level. "It's okay. You're safe now. I promise." She had no idea how she was going to keep that promise. She had no money, no plan, and no way forward. But as the smallest cub took a hesitant step toward her, its golden eyes full of cautious hope, Claire knew she had made the right choice. Some things were more important than credits. Some things were worth everything. Danny was standing at the airlock when Claire returned to the ship. His arms were crossed over his chest, and his face held an expression that Claire had never seen before. It was somewhere between anger and complete disbelief. "What?" he said slowly. "Are those?" Claire looked down at the 7 small creatures following behind her. They moved in a tight group, staying close to her legs, their golden eyes darting nervously at everything around them. The smallest one, the one Claire had already started calling Pip in her mind, was holding onto the edge of her jacket with tiny fingers. "They're Myrelian cubs," Claire said. "Their names are Mir, Tavi, Shen, Laura, Den, Yuki, and Pip. And they're coming with us." Danny stared at her. Then he looked at his tablet, at the numbers that showed their account balance. His face went pale. "Claire, we have less than 200 credits left. We can't afford fuel. We can't afford food. We can't even afford to stay docked here for more than 3 days." His voice was rising with each word. "What were you thinking?" "I was thinking that they were going to be killed," Claire said quietly. "I was thinking that someone had to do something. Someone. Why does that someone have to be you?" Danny threw his hands up in frustration. "We have responsibilities. We have debts. We have a ship that's falling apart. And now we have 7 mouths to feed with nothing to feed them?" The cubs pressed closer together at his loud voice. Mir, the eldest, moved to stand in front of the others. She was barely 3 feet tall, but she faced Danny with a look of fierce determination, ready to protect her siblings from this angry stranger. Claire knelt down and placed a gentle hand on Mir's shoulder. "It's okay. He's a friend. He's just scared." "I'm not scared," Danny snapped. "I'm realistic. There's a difference." Claire stood up and met his eyes. "Danny. I watched them sitting in that cage, waiting to be taken apart and sold for scraps. They're children. I couldn't just walk away. Other people walked away. The whole crowd walked away. That's what people do out here, Claire. They survive. They don't throw away everything for strangers." "Maybe that's the problem," Claire said. "Maybe that's why everything out here is so broken. Because everyone just walks away." Danny opened his mouth to argue more, but no words came out. He stood there for a long moment, looking at Claire, looking at the cubs, and then looking at the empty corridor of their ship. Finally, he let out a long breath and rubbed his face with both hands. "Fine," he muttered. "Fine. But when we starved to death floating in dead space, I wanted on record that I told you this was a bad idea." He turned and walked back into the ship. Claire allowed herself a small smile before leading the cubs inside. The next few hours were spent making a home for them. Claire cleared out a storage compartment near the back of the ship. It was not big, but it was warm and safe. She gathered every blanket she owned, every piece of soft clothing she could spare, and built a nest in the corner. The cubs watched her work with wide eyes, not quite believing what they were seeing. When she was done, she sat down on the floor and opened her pack of emergency ration bars. They were dry and tasteless, designed for nutrition rather than enjoyment. She broke one into pieces and held them out to the cubs. "Here," she said. "You must be hungry." They hesitated. Mir stepped forward first, sniffing the food carefully before taking a piece. She chewed it slowly, then turned to the others and made a soft, chirping sound. One by one, the cubs came forward and took their share. Claire watched them eat. Her stomach growled, but she ignored it. There would be time for her to eat later. Maybe. That night, after the cubs had fallen asleep in their new nest, Danny found Claire sitting alone in the cockpit. The lights of the station glowed through the viewport, and the silence of space pressed in from all sides. "You gave them your rations," Danny said. "It was not a question." Claire shrugged. "They needed it more than me." Danny sat down in the co-pilot seat. He was quiet for a while, just watching the stars. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than before. "Why do you care so much? About them, I mean. You don't even know them." Claire was silent for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "When I was a kid on Earth, I wanted to be a vet. I wanted to help animals, protect them, give them a voice. Then everything collapsed. The economy, my family, everything. I ended up out here, hauling cargo, just trying to survive like everyone else." She paused, her eyes distant. "I've spent 15 years watching bad things happen to innocent creatures. I've seen species go extinct. I've seen planets die. I've seen people treat living beings like objects, like resources to be used up and thrown away. And I never did anything. I always told myself it wasn't my problem, that I couldn't afford to care." She looked at Danny. "I'm tired of not caring. I'm tired of being the person who walks away. Even if it costs me everything. I had to do something. Just once. I had to matter." Danny did not respond right away. He sat with her words, turning them over in his mind. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Okay," he said. The next morning, Danny rigged a water reclamation system using spare parts from the engine room. It was not pretty, but it worked. Clean water for the cubs without using their limited supply. Claire worked on teaching the cubs to understand her. The translation device she had was cheap and old, and their language was difficult. But slowly they began to communicate. She learned that they had been captured from a refugee convoy 3 months ago. Their parents had been killed in the attack. They had been passed from trader to trader ever since, waiting for a buyer or a death sentence. Mir proved to be remarkably clever. She watched everything Claire did with intense focus, asking questions through broken phrases and gestures. When Claire showed her how the ship's basic navigation worked, Mir absorbed the information like water into dry sand. But time was running out. Every hour they stayed docked cost credits they did not have. The station security had already sent 2 warnings about their expired permits. Soon they would be forced to leave, one way or another. Claire sat in the cockpit that night, staring at her empty account, and wondered how she was going to save 7 lives when she could barely save her own. Then her communication panel blinked with an incoming message, and everything changed. The message was short and simple. It said only, "Heard you need work. Docking Bay 12. Come alone." Claire stared at the words on her screen for a long time. She did not recognize the sender, and that made her nervous. Out here on the edge of space, mysterious messages usually meant trouble, but trouble was better than starvation. She told Danny to stay with the cubs and walked through the station's dark corridors alone. The lights flickered overhead as she moved deeper into the lower levels, where the air was thicker and the crowds were thinner. Docking Bay 12 was in a forgotten corner of the station, far from the main traffic and the watching eyes of security. A woman was waiting for her there. She leaned against a cargo crate with her arms crossed, a cigarette burning between her fingers. Her hair was cut short and dyed a deep red color, and her eyes held the sharp look of someone who had seen too much and trusted too little. A scar ran across her left cheek, white against her dark skin. "Claire Morrison," the woman said. "Still flying that piece of junk?" Claire stopped a few feet away, her hand close to the small knife she kept hidden in her belt. "Do I know you?" The woman smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Kira Voss. 2 years ago. Customs patrol in the Nebula sector. You let me hide in your cargo hold when they came looking." The memory came back slowly. A desperate woman with a ship full of medical supplies meant for a plague colony. Customs had wanted to impound everything over paperwork issues. Claire had looked the other way and let Kira disappear into her ship until the patrol gave up and left. "I remember," Claire said. "You owe me a favor." "I owe you my life," Kira corrected. "And I always pay my debts." She pushed herself off the crate and dropped her cigarette, crushing it under her boot. Word travels fast on this station. Everyone's talking about the crazy human who spent her last credit on a cage full of alien orphans. Claire said nothing. There was nothing to say. Kira studied her for a moment, her eyes unreadable. "You're either the bravest person I've ever met, or the stupidest. Maybe both." She reached into her jacket and pulled out a data chip. "I have a job. Legal cargo. Legal destination. The problem is the route." "What's wrong with the route?" "It passes through Corvani space." Kira held up the chip. "And your friend Vethrak has been telling everyone who will listen that you embarrassed him. He's put a watch order on your ship. Any Corvani patrol that spots you will pull you over and make your life very difficult." Claire felt her stomach tighten. "Why would you offer me this job if it's so dangerous?" "Because no one else will take it. And because the pay is good." Kira pressed the chip into Claire's hand. 10,000 credits. Enough to fuel your ship, fix your problems, and disappear somewhere the Corvani will never find you. 10,000 credits. It was more money than Claire had seen in years. It was freedom. It was hope. "What's the cargo?" she asked. "Agricultural equipment, seeds, tools, irrigation systems, bound for a farming colony that's struggling to survive. Nothing illegal, nothing dangerous." Kira shrugged. "The only problem is getting it there." Claire looked at the chip in her hand. She thought about the cubs sleeping in their nest back on the ship. She thought about Danny and his warnings about being realistic. She thought about all the ways this could go wrong. Then she closed her fingers around the chip and nodded. "I'll do it." Kira's smile widened, and this time there was a hint of genuine warmth in it. "I knew you would. The cargo will be delivered to your ship within the hour, payment on completion." She started to walk away, then stopped and looked back. "Good luck, Claire. You're going to need it." 3 hours later, the Drifter's Luck launched from Waystation Omega-7 with barely enough fuel to make the first jump. The cargo hold was full of crates marked with agricultural symbols, and the cockpit was crowded with more passengers than it was designed to hold. The cubs had refused to stay in their compartment during launch. They wanted to see the stars. Claire did not have the heart to send them away, so she let them crowd around the viewport, their golden eyes wide with wonder as the station fell away behind them. Pip, the smallest one, pressed his tiny hands against the glass. "Pretty," he said in his broken attempt at human speech. It was the first word he had spoken to her. Claire felt something warm bloom in her chest. "Yes," she agreed. Very pretty. Danny plotted their course while Claire handled the controls. The route took them through 3 jump points, each one bringing them deeper into dangerous territory. Corvani space was vast and heavily patrolled, and their ship would stand out like a signal fire in the darkness. First jump in 5 minutes, Danny announced. He looked at Claire with worried eyes. You sure about this? No, Claire admitted, but I'm doing it anyway. The jump drive hummed to life, and the stars stretched into lines of light as they plunged into faster-than-light travel. For a few moments, everything was peaceful. The cubs made soft sounds of amazement at the strange beauty of jump space. Mir sat next to Claire, watching her hands on the controls, learning. They emerged on the other side in a quiet sector of space. No patrols? No danger. Claire let out a breath she did not know she was holding. 1 down, Danny said. 2 to go. The second jump was just as smooth. They passed through empty space, saw nothing but distant stars and drifting asteroids. The cubs grew bolder, exploring the cockpit, asking questions that Claire answered as best she could. Danny even started teaching Tavi how to read the navigation displays. Then they made the 3rd jump, and everything changed. They emerged into Corvani space, and immediately the communication panel lit up with an incoming signal. Claire's blood ran cold as she saw the identifier code. Corvani patrol vessel. Human ship drifters luck. A harsh voice crackled through the speakers. Cut your engines and prepare to be boarded. Failure to comply will be met with force. Claire looked at Danny. Danny looked back at her. In the back of the cockpit, 7 cubs fell silent, their golden eyes filling with fear. What do we do? Danny whispered. Claire gripped the controls and stared at the patrol ship growing larger in their viewport. She had no weapons. She had no speed. She had no way to run. All she had was herself. We do what we have to, she said. Danny, take the cubs and hide them in the emergency compartment behind the engine room. Go. Now. Danny grabbed the cubs and disappeared into the ship. Claire sat alone in the cockpit, watching the patrol vessel approach, and prepared herself for the fight of her life. The Corvani patrol ship was 3 times the size of the Drifter's Luck. Its hull was covered in weapons, and its engines glowed with power that Claire's little cargo hauler could never match. As it moved closer, its shadow fell across her viewport like a dark cloud blocking out the sun. Claire sat very still in her pilot seat. Her hands were steady on the controls, but her heart was beating so fast she could feel it in her throat. Behind her, she heard Danny's footsteps fading as he led the cubs to their hiding place. She was alone now, alone against whatever was coming. The airlock hissed as the docking clamps connected. Heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor. Then the inner door slid open, and 3 Corvani soldiers entered her ship. They were tall, nearly 7 feet each, with green scales and 4 arms that ended in clawed hands. Their eyes were cold and yellow, and they carried weapons that hummed with deadly energy. Behind them came a 4th Corvani, older than the others, with darker scales and a silver marking on his chest that showed his rank. The commander. He looked around the cockpit with obvious disgust. His 4 eyes moved slowly over the worn seats, the patched walls, the flickering displays. When his gaze finally settled on Claire, his lip curled in something like amusement. So, he said, you are the human everyone is talking about. The one who bought the Myrelian livestock from Vethrak. Claire forced herself to meet his eyes. They're not livestock. They're children. The commander made a sound that might have been a laugh. Children. Livestock. The difference is only in how you choose to see them. To us, they are resources, nothing more. He gestured to his soldiers. Search the ship, find them. The soldiers moved past Claire, their heavy boots shaking the floor as they went. She heard them opening compartments, moving crates, searching every corner of her small ship. Her stomach twisted with fear, but she kept her face calm. Your manifest says you are carrying agricultural equipment, the commander said, picking up a data pad from the console. A legitimate cargo. A legal destination. And yet you chose to fly through our space, Knowing that Vethrak had placed a watch order on your ship, that was either very brave or very foolish. Maybe both, Claire said quietly. The commander tilted his head, studying her. Why did you do it? Why did you spend everything you had on creatures that mean nothing to you? Claire thought about the question. It was the same question Danny had asked. The same question she had been asking herself ever since she raised her hand at that auction. Because they were afraid, she said finally. Because they were alone. Because someone had to help them, and no one else would. Sentiment, the commander said, as if the word was something dirty. Humans are full of sentiment. It makes you weak. Maybe, Claire agreed. Or maybe it makes us something you don't understand. The commander stared at her for a long moment. Then, one of his soldiers called from the back of the ship. Commander, we have searched everywhere. The cargo is clean. There is nothing else aboard. The commander frowned. His eyes swept the cockpit again, looking for anything his soldiers might have missed. Claire held her breath. The emergency compartment behind the engine room was small and well hidden, but it was not invisible. If they looked hard enough, if they used their scanners, a small sound came from somewhere behind the wall. A whimper. Tiny and soft, but unmistakable in the silence. The commander's head snapped toward the noise. His 4 eyes narrowed. What was that? Claire stood up before she could stop herself. She moved to block the corridor. Not aggressively, but firmly. She was small, compared to the Corvani, but she stood as tall as she could. That was nothing, she said. Just the ship settling. It's old. It makes noises. The commander did not believe her. She could see it in his eyes. He took a step toward the corridor, his hand moving toward his weapon. Then Mir appeared. The young Myrelian stepped out from behind the engine room door, her gray fur dirty and her golden eyes bright with fear. But she did not run. She did not hide. She walked forward until she stood beside Claire, and then she turned to face the commander. Behind her, one by one, the other cubs emerged. Tavi, Shen, Laura, Den, Yuki, and little Pip. They moved to stand with their sister, forming a small line of trembling but determined children. The commander looked at them with something like surprise. He had expected to find them cowering in a corner, not standing in the open, facing him without weapons or power. Mir spoke. Her voice was shaky, and her words were broken and hard to understand. But she spoke them anyway. This human saved us, she said. She gave everything for us. She is good. She is kind. The young cub lifted her chin and met the commander's cold yellow eyes. Will you be the one to undo her kindness? Will you be the one who takes us back to the cages? The silence that followed was the longest of Claire's life. The commander looked at Mir. He looked at the cubs standing with her. He looked at Claire, this strange human who had thrown away her future for creatures she had never met. He did not understand. That much was clear on his face. This made no sense to him. There was no profit in what Claire had done. No advantage. No logic. Just pure, irrational compassion. And yet, search complete, he said suddenly, turning to his soldiers. There is nothing here. We are leaving. The soldiers exchanged confused looks but obeyed without question. They filed back toward the airlock, their weapons lowering to their sides. The commander followed, but at the door he stopped and looked back at Claire. Humans are strange creatures, he said. You waste resources on those who can offer nothing in return. You sacrifice yourselves for strangers. You act against your own interests, for reasons that make no sense. He paused. I do not understand you. I do not think I ever will. Claire took a breath. Maybe, she said. That's the point. The commander held her gaze for another moment. Then he turned and walked through the airlock. The door sealed behind him. The docking clamps released, and the patrol ship pulled away, disappearing into the darkness of space. Claire stood frozen until the ship was out of sight. Then her knees gave out, and she sank to the floor. The cubs rushed to her, their small hands touching her face, her arms, her hair. Pip climbed into her lap and pressed his face against her chest. Safe now? He asked in his tiny voice. Claire wrapped her arms around him and held him tight. Her eyes were wet, but she was smiling. "Yes," she whispered. "Safe now." The rest of the journey passed without trouble. The drifter's luck made its way through the remaining jump points, leaving Corvani space behind like a bad dream fading in the morning light. Claire kept watch through every hour. But no more patrol ships appeared. No more threats came from the darkness. It was almost as if the universe had decided to give them a break. The farming colony was a small green world on the edge of an unnamed system. As the ship descended through the clouds, Claire saw endless fields of crops stretching toward the horizon. People worked the land below, tiny figures moving between rows of plants, building a life in a place that the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. They needed the equipment she was carrying. Seeds to grow food, tools to work the soil, irrigation systems to bring water to dry land. Simple things that meant the difference between life and death for a struggling community. The colonists greeted her with gratitude and warm food. They paid her what they owed, and she did not ask for more. When she climbed back into her ship, her account showed 10,000 credits, more money than she had seen in years. It felt strange. After so long with nothing, having something was almost frightening. Danny was waiting in the cockpit with a message on the communication panel. He looked different than he had a week ago. Lighter somehow. Like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. "Someone's been asking about the cubs," he said. A lot of someone's, actually. Claire read the messages with growing amazement. Word had spread faster than she could have imagined. A human cargo hauler who spent her last credit to save 7 alien orphans from death. It was a small story, barely worth mentioning in the grand scheme of the galaxy. But somehow, it had touched something in people. It had reminded them that kindness still existed, even in the cold darkness of space. One message stood out from the others. It came from a Myrelian survivor colony on a distant moon. A place where the scattered refugees of a destroyed world were slowly gathering, trying to rebuild what they had lost. They had heard about the cubs. They wanted to help. "They're offering to take them in," Danny said. "To raise them with their own people. Give them a home. A family." Claire looked back at the cubs playing in the cargo hold. They were different now than they had been on that auction platform. They laughed more. They talked more. Pip had learned a dozen new words and used all of them constantly. Ta'avi had figured out how to help Danny with repairs. Shen and Laura had discovered the ship's tiny music player and spent hours listening to human songs they did not understand. They were healing. Slowly, but healing. "What do you think?" Claire asked. Danny shrugged. "I think they deserve to be with their own kind. To grow up knowing their language, their culture, their history." He paused. "But I think you should ask them what they want." So Claire did. She gathered the cubs in the cargo hold and explained what the message said. She told them about the colony, about the other Myrelians who lived there, about the chance to have a real home with people who looked like them and spoke like them and understood them in ways that Claire never could. Most of the cubs listened with wide eyes and excited whispers. A real home. A family. Other Myrelians. After everything they had been through, it sounded like a dream too good to be true. But Mir was quiet. The eldest cub sat apart from the others, her golden eyes thoughtful. Her tail wrapped tightly around her feet. "What about you?" she asked Claire. "What will you do?" Claire smiled. "I'll keep flying, keep hauling cargo, keep trying to do a little good when I can." Mir nodded slowly. Then she stood up and walked to Claire's side. "I want to stay," she said. "With you. On the ship." The other cubs fell silent. Danny raised an eyebrow. Claire felt her heart skip a beat. "Are you sure?" she asked. "The colony could give you so much. Education. Security. A future with your own people. You are my people now." Mir said simply. "You saved us. You protected us. You taught me about the stars." She looked up at Claire with fierce determination in her young eyes. "I want to learn more. I want to fly. I want to help others the way you helped us." Claire looked at Danny. He shrugged again, but this time he was smiling. "We could use an extra set of hands," he said. 3 days later, the drifter's luck landed on the Myrelian colony moon. The sky was purple and gold, lit by the giant planet that hung on the horizon. The air smelled like flowers that Claire did not recognize. And everywhere she looked, there were Myrelians. Dozens of them. Hundreds, maybe. All gathered to welcome the cubs home. The reunion was overwhelming. Tavi, Shen, Laura, Den, Yuki, and Pip were surrounded by new family before they even stepped off the ship. There were tears and embraces, and soft chirping sounds that Claire did not understand but could feel in her chest. The cubs were home. Finally. After everything, they were home. Claire stood at the edge of the crowd and watched. Danny stood beside her, and Mir stood beside him. The young cub held Claire's hand tightly, her grip warm and steady. "Thank you," said an elderly Myrelian, approaching Claire with tears in his golden eyes. "Thank you for saving our children. Thank you for reminding the galaxy that kindness still exists." Claire did not know what to say, so she just nodded and squeezed Mir's hand a little tighter. The launch sequence was quiet. The 6 cubs waved from the ground as the drifter's luck lifted off, their small figures growing smaller and smaller until they disappeared entirely. Claire watched them until the last possible moment, then turned her attention to the stars ahead. Danny settled into the co-pilot seat. Mir took her place beside him, her eyes already scanning the navigation charts with hungry curiosity. "So," Danny said, breaking the silence, "any regrets?" Claire thought about the question. She thought about her empty bank account at that auction. She thought about the fear and the uncertainty and all the moments when she had been sure that everything would fall apart. Then she thought about Pip learning to say his first word, about Mir standing up to the Corvani commander, about 6 cubs waving goodbye from a world where they finally belonged. "No," she said, "not a single one." Danny smiled. It was a real smile this time, not the tired half-smile she had grown used to over the years. "Good," he said, "because I don't either." Mir leaned forward in her seat, pointing at something on the star chart. "What's that system there? The one with the 3 suns?" Claire looked where she was pointing and grinned. "I don't know." "Want to find out?" The young Myrelian's eyes lit up with excitement. "Yes, please, yes." The drifter's luck turned toward the unknown, its engines humming with new life. Behind them, the colony moon faded into the distance. Ahead, the galaxy stretched out in all directions, full of danger and wonder and endless possibility. Claire Morrison had started this journey with nothing but a handful of credits and a heart full of hope. Now she had a ship, a partner, and a new family member ready to face whatever came next. It was not a bad trade at all.